I'm going to wait until I record. There we go. So just a couple of quick announcements for you. The review session will be tomorrow night at 7 o'clock on Zoom. I will email you all a Zoom link after class so that you're able to access it. If you can't make it, I will be recording for you. And then also don't forget that next week your project is due for the Choose Your Own Adventure book. So if you haven't had time to meet with your group, now might be a really good time. And if you're struggling a little bit, one thing I can tell you is that division of labor can work pretty well too. Somebody can write the book, somebody can draw the pictures, do whatever you need to do, and let me know if you have any questions on anything, okay? The study guide has been up for about a week, so make sure that you take a look at it. Be prepared. I think you will all do great. All right. So the last time we were here, we were starting to talk about stress. How many of you are stressed right now? And be completely honest with me, is my exam one of your stressors? I know, I hate tests too. I always hated tests. That's why I became a professor, so I would never have to give them. Actually, that's not true. I became a professor because I love research and I love what I study. But as an added perk, I never have to take tests. I just give them, which is its own different sort of stress. So the last time that we were here, we were starting to talk about the different things that create stress. Now, from what we learned, for those of you that were here on Friday or watched the recording, what is another word for things that cause us stress? Stressors, yes. So remember that on the test, you are going to need to be able to identify a stressor, which is something that causes stress, stress itself, which is the process of responding to threats or challenges, and then stress reactions, which is how your body responds to stress. So when you take the exam and you kind of get like a pounding heart, or your stomach kind of feels queasy, that's a stress reaction. So be able to differentiate between the three of those on the test. I will be asking about them. But let's talk about the different things that actually can create stress in our lives. So typically researchers will divide stressors into three major categories: catastrophes, life changes, and daily hassles. So catastrophes are usually very, very big events. So things like really bad car accidents, natural disasters, really, really big events that are traumatic. Then we have life changes. So these are big, notable changes in your life. Things like going to college, things like getting your first job, getting married, things like that. And then daily hassles are probably the biggest things that cause us stress. These are things like, the line at the Walmart was too long. There's too much traffic. I'm just annoyed at all the papers I have to grade. Actually, I don't have a lot of papers to grade yet. So daily hassles are kind of the little things that we run into every day that kind of bug us a little bit. Now, if you had to kind of raise your hand if you're struggling with stress from catastrophes most. Okay, how about life changes? Okay, if you're a freshman, you are probably dealing with a very big life change right now and trying to adjust to college. Now, what about daily hassles? How much? Yeah, most of my stress comes from daily hassles. Have you ever heard the phrase sweating the small stuff? That's me. I always sweat the small stuff. I'm actually pretty good with the big stuff. But what you're looking at here, this kind of relates to stress and the role that things like life changes and daily hassles play in your everyday life. So what you're looking at here are different age groups, and I don't necessarily like how they've grouped the different age groups, but whatever. 18 to 19, 20 to 24, 25 to 34, 35 to 44, 45 to 54, 55 to 64, 65 to 74, and 75 and up. And what you're noticing on this graph, on our y-axis, we have the percentage of people that are experiencing high stress. Who here is 18 or 19 years old? Congratulations, you are the age group that is experiencing the most stress. Who here is between 20 and 24? Cool, you're the group that is experiencing the second most amount of stress. So what we tend to find is that we experience most of our stress in adolescence and young adulthood, and with age, it kind of levels off. Does anybody have any idea why something like that might happen? Why would you be more stressed when you're young, and as you get older, you're less stressed? Anybody have any thoughts? Yeah, Michelle.
Probably because like in our society, this is the age where you have to decide everything that you want to do with the rest of your life, and then the rest of your life you're just doing the rest of your life. So,
I mean, it is true. I mean, what are the big milestones that you hit after 25? Oh, cool, you can rent a car. You can rent a hotel room. Yay. Actually, those are very nice things to have. It's nice to be able to rent a car. But you're absolutely right. When you're in young adulthood, this is when you're going probably through the greatest amount of life changes. For many of you, you've started college, and once you leave college, you will be getting your first job, probably getting your first place that's away from a college. Many of you might be getting married or having kids or things like that. And as you get older, you get used to these things. You get used to handling them. But here's your first time doing it. And that can be really, really stressful. It does get easier to adult as you go. Of course, I'm somebody who thought I was an adult when I was 16, and I most assuredly was not. I don't think I learned how to balance a checkbook or erase credit card debt until maybe like 4 years ago. Okay. So let's talk about the effect that stress has on our bodies. So in general, stress triggers the activation of our sympathetic nervous system. Now, we're going to go all the way back to chapter 2 when we talked about the different divisions of the nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is a branch of the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is all about those automatic functions that we don't really have to think about very much. Things like our heart rate, our blood pressure, our breathing. Now, can you control your breathing? Yeah. But are you doing it all the time? No. I mean, your autonomic nervous system basically takes care of all of the breathing for you while you sleep, because you're not going to be able to do it. But the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system basically is designed to help you deal with stressful events. So it's going to trigger a fight or flight response. Your body is going to mobilize its resources to give you the energy that you need to either fight stress or run away from it. And by running away from stress, I usually mean things like, I'm worried about the test, I'm not going to study, I'm just going to watch Netflix. That's running away from stress. You're not actually like, oh no, there's a test in the room, I got to run away. It doesn't work like that. Now this, so you can see that different things are going to happen to your body when you're stressed. Your arteries are going to widen so that more blood flow, especially oxygen-rich blood, can get to your organs and your lungs and your brain. The hypothalamus and the amygdala are going to be activated, as is the pituitary gland. Your heart is going to beat faster. Your lungs are going to ventilate faster. Your muscles are going to tense. Your adrenal glands are going to release hormones like epinephrine and norepinephrine, and your stomach is basically going to shut down digestion. But all of the things, so one thing that I will mention is that we were not necessarily meant to deal with stress over a long period of time. So how many of you have been stressed probably for the greater part of a month? And that is okay. Here's the thing. In our ancestral history, we didn't usually have months-long periods of stress. Your body was not originally designed for dealing with a whole semester's worth of stress. Now, when I say that, I want to be really clear. I am not saying you are wrong or bad or defective for being stressed. You're a human being. And I know stress probably better than anybody. Like, I have anxiety, I have struggled with anxiety disorders. It's something that I understand. So we were meant to deal with stress for a shorter period of time. Oh no, there's a woolly mammoth. I should run away from that as quickly as I can, and then it's over. We weren't meant for prolonged periods of stress, and it is going to basically cause a toll on our bodies and our health. So one of the first people to actually look at how we respond to stress was Hans Selye. And he described our body's response to stress by looking at rats. I know, right? Like, how much can we learn from rats? Well, apparently we can learn a lot. So the very first phase of what Selye called his general adaptation syndrome was what is called an alarm reaction. This is your body registering that something stressful is happening. So it raises a red flag like, uh-oh, something big's happening, be ready. Resistance is basically the process of your body mobilizing its resources to fight the stress. So you're basically setting up a defense to help you fight the stressful thing. And then after that stressful period, you might experience a little bit of exhaustion. So your body is basically going to slow down. This is a time for rest and recovery and for conserving your resources. So occasionally, not as much as I used to, I'll be pretty open with you, I get panic attacks. Not all that often, but sometimes they happen. And what I find is that after I've gone through that, I'm pretty tired. It takes a lot of energy to mobilize against something that's stressful, even if the stressful thing is just something in your own mind. And so because of that, you need that time to conserve your resources and recover. So make sure that you have a pretty good understanding of general adaptation syndrome. I believe it is a short answer question on the test. So make sure that you know what an alarm reaction is, what resistance is, and what exhaustion is. And I don't trick. If I tell you it's going to be on there, by golly, it's going to be on there. Okay, everybody good? All right. So one of the things that we find is that when we're dealing with stress, there are different ways that we can cope with our stress. So how many of you tend to withdraw? Like you're stressed out by something, and so it's easier to kind of avoid it or not engage. Now, I am certainly not judging you if this is your strategy. It actually has some pretty good benefits. It helps conserve your energy and your resources. The problem is that sometimes this withdrawal can lead to basically paralysis, not actual physical paralysis, but more, I've been hiding from this so long, and now the stressful thing is getting worse. What do? I don't know what to do. I'm functionally not able to make a decision. So you're stuck in this indecision and confusion, and the thing is still stressing you out. So this is something that kind of happened with my sister a little bit. When my sister and I were in college, my sister is really smart. She might actually be smarter than me, but she, at least when we were young adults, school was not her favorite thing. She liked being social and preferred not to go to class. So here's the thing about not going to class, especially if you have assignments, they start to build up. And so she had more and more of these assignments that she hadn't done, and they were stacking up. And instead of going and talking to professors and saying, you know, what can I do? She is somebody who likes to withdraw. And so because of that, the situation kept getting worse, and it kept her in that avoidance strategy of not coming to class. And so it just ended up making the situation worse. She's a lot better at it now, for sure. But when she was young, she had to learn a little bit. Now, on the other hand, somebody like me, and many of you might be like this too, if you're stressed out, you want to find support. You want to talk to somebody. You want to vent with somebody. And this is what is referred to as a tend and befriend response. For many of us, one of the ways that we cope with our stress is by helping other people and getting our support system into play. Now, I am about to apologize because this is something your book kind of brings up. And again, I am referring to a binary, and I apologize for that as well. But in general, people who present as female tend to be more likely to do that tend and befriend response. Some of that is most likely due to socialization. Men or people who present as male often are going to be more likely to withdraw. Now, that doesn't mean that if you identify as female that you're always going to do tend and befriend. Some of you might withdraw. Likewise, if you're somebody that identifies as male, you might actually do a tend and befriend response. But there's a lot of data showing that just in general, like men don't really have those tighter friend groups, and they certainly are socialized to not talk about their feelings. So withdrawal is often going to be the more common strategy. But again, I am speaking in very generalist terms. It's obviously going to be a bit more complicated than that in real life. So let's talk a little bit about stress and its effect on your health. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but your immune system does require energy to work the way it does. You also use energy to fight stress. Now, raise your hand if you think anybody has an infinite resource of energy. None of us do, not even me, not even me. Energy is a finite resource in our bodies. So here's what this means. It means that if we're fighting stress, it means that things like our immune system do not get the energy that they need to fight invaders. So how many of you have had this happen? This used to happen to me all the time when I was in school. Like we're talking middle school on up. I would never really feel super stressed during the semester, but as soon as the semester ended or I went on winter break or summer break, I immediately got sick. Usually something with laryngitis. How many of you has that happened to? The semester ends and boom, you're laid out with something. One time it was the flu. I do not recommend that to anybody. So your psychological states affect your immune system. When you're in a really good place and you're not stressed and you're taking good care of your well-being and your health, your immune system is going to be clicking on all cylinders, unless, of course, you have autoimmune issues, in which case you should be talking with your doctor to make sure that it's working as well as it can. But psychological states do affect our immune system. There is an entire field of study for this, and it is called psychoneuroimmunology. Isn't that a fun word? So we have the psychology, then we have the brain, hence the neuro, and then we have immunology, the immune system. So let's talk a little bit about how our immune system normally handles intruders. So in your body, and if you've been kind of following up with the development of the COVID vaccines, you might have heard people refer to B and T lymphocytes. They're sometimes referred to as memory cells. They remember what different invaders look like, and they are basically designed to kill bacteria, viruses, and they actually do kill cancer cells. So cancer cells really are just abnormal mutations of your own cells. And most of the time, when your immune system is firing on all cylinders, it can kill it. Now, the ability of the immune system to do its job does weaken with age, and it becomes a lot harder to destroy those cancer cells, which is why cancer becomes a little bit more likely for many people as they age. But we have B lymphocytes, our white blood cells. These come from the bone marrow, which is why we call them B. And then we have our T lymphocytes, which come from the thymus gland. So the B lymphocytes largely kill bacteria. Your T lymphocytes largely kill viruses and cancer cells. And in addition to that, we have what is called a microphage. So phage literally means eat. So these ingest harmful invaders like viruses, bacteria, and cancer cells. They also eat dead viruses, dead cells, and other types of debris. So when you think of a macrophage, you can think of like a Pac-Man cell going nom, 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 nom. Phage literally means eating. So normally, when your immune system is doing okay, these will be produced, your immune system will produce these white blood cells to help you fight infection. So it's part of the reason why sometimes they're able to tell if you're fighting an infection by looking at your white blood cell count. If you have more white blood cells than normal, if it's elevated, you're probably fighting something. Is everybody good? I tried to put fewer words on this one. Can you tell? Yes. Okay. So here's the thing. Being able to produce things like macrophages and lymphocytes require energy. Now, there's another type of cell that I didn't mention that your textbook talks about called NK cells. Those are called natural killer cells. They also go out and try to destroy cancer cells. But the thing is, to be able to have all of these fighters, so your B and your T lymphocytes, your NK cells, your macrophages, you need to have energy to be able to produce them. If you're stressed, your energy is already being diverted to fighting stress, which means you don't have as much ability as you normally would to be able to beef up your immune system. So when you're stressed, your body actually is diverting energy from the immune system. So they've actually looked at this. What you're looking at here is a percentage of people with colds. And what you can see on your x-axis is psychological stress. Higher numbers mean more stress. And people do tend to find that for people who are more stressed, if they're exposed to a cold virus, they're going to be more likely to get a cold. Now, this obviously will have effects on fighting other types of illnesses, such as AIDS and cancer. Now, I want to make one thing really clear. Stress has a role, absolutely, but it's not the only role. So please, 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 if you struggle with something like AIDS or cancer, please don't blame yourself for getting too stressed. You're a human. Stress is just one piece of the puzzle. It also means that if you can magically manage your stress, this isn't a guarantee that these things won't happen. It's just one piece of the puzzle. It is not the whole pie. I mixed up my metaphors. I started with puzzle and then I ended with pie. Hope that's okay. Everybody good? Does anybody need some more time? All right. So let's talk about one disease that is intensely linked to stress. So as I mentioned with a lot of other diseases and terminal illnesses such as AIDS, cancer, and the like, stress plays a role, but it's obviously not the only thing. Obviously, your genetics will play a role, your health will play a role, but we do know that there is one disease that is very strongly linked to stress, and that is coronary heart disease. Heart disease is very linked to stress. So what you're looking at here are arteries. Here is a normal artery. Here is an artery that is closing because of coronary heart disease. And this can lead to some problems. If your blood vessels are closing and blocking, this means that your heart and your organs are not getting the blood flow that they need. This could lead to things like heart attack. It could lead to higher blood pressure. It could lead to things like stroke. So take care of your hearts. You only get one, and it's, well, you can get a transplant, but those can be hard. So take care of the one you got. It's the engine that keeps your body running. But we know that stress actually plays a huge role in your coronary health. So That actually makes sense when you think about it, because when your sympathetic nervous system gets activated, one of the first things you notice is your heart rate goes up. When you go out for a run, you are putting your body under stress and your heart rate goes up. That is probably going to have some effect on your heart if you're stressed for long periods of time. So researchers actually looked at the heart health profiles of tax accountants. They looked at these during 2 different periods of the year. Now, for tax accountants, what's the most stressful time of year? Huh?
April.
March, April, basically from January on all the way to April. That's tax season. In January, most people get their W-2s from their jobs. They have to file them. And so a lot of people are going to be seeing tax accountants all the way up to our tax deadline of April 15th. So they actually looked at the heart health profiles of accountants before and after tax season. Before tax season, their hearts were actually in pretty good shape. For many of them, their heart health profiles actually declined and got much worse during tax season. That stress really started to play a role in their heart. Thankfully, it reverses within a couple of months. So, but it is kind of a reminder, take good care of your heart. Try to manage your stress if you can. So your personality type matters too. So now obviously the world is not black and white. There are not just 2 types of people in the world, but we have a concept known as a type A personality. You might be asked to identify a type A personality on your test, and a type B. So somebody who is a type A personality is somebody who's pretty competitive, they're ambitious, but they're also impatient and kind of prone to anger. These are the kind of people that sweat the small stuff. On the other hand, a type B personality, this is somebody who kind of goes with the flow. They're not easily agitated. They're pretty calm. They're pretty relaxed. So based on these 2 descriptions, who here thinks they're type A? Who thinks they're type B? Who's kind of in the middle? Who says, I don't subscribe to 2 types of people, Dr. Gilchrist. We are individuals. Yes, yes, I know. But here's what's interesting. So what we find is that with people that have type A personalities, they are actually more prone to things like heart disease. Why? Is it because they're competitive? Is it because they're ambitious? Like, I'm pretty ambitious. Is that going to be a problem for my heart? Researchers say no. It's not the competitiveness or the ambitiousness that is the problem. It is the fact that for most people with type A personalities, there is always an undercurrent of negative emotions, particularly anger and frustration. So a type A person hates waiting in line. Do you know why they hate waiting in line? Because they have a goal. They want to get out of the store. They want to check out their stuff and get out. And all of these other people in front of them are obstacles to that goal. That's why nobody likes waiting in line if they are a type A personality. So it's that undercurrent of anger that really seems to play a role here. Research has found that anger can actually alter your blood flow and your heart rhythm, especially if you're angry over a long period of time. I think these are probably the most words we've had on a slide yet. That's it. Okay, everybody good? All right. So how do we cope? I hate to break it to you. If any of you are hoping for a stress-free life, that's not going to happen. Everybody is going to have to deal with some stress in their life. Stressful events are largely unavoidable. So there are 2 different ways that we can actually manage our stress. So the first is what is called problem-focused coping. So we directly try to solve the problem by changing the stressor. So for example, if you're not getting along with your suite mates, a way to basically engage in problem-focused coping would be either to confront your suite mates and talk to them and address the issue, or potentially change suites. In both of those cases, you are directly trying to change the source of your stress. Now, sometimes you can't change the source of your stress, can you? Probably not. And so under those circumstances, when we can't change things, we can engage in what is called emotion-focused coping. So when we're stressed, we try to manage the emotions that we feel. So for example, if I'm having a hard day at work due to something that I cannot change, emotion-focused coping might be to watch a funny movie at home later on that night. I can't directly change the stressor, so I'm going to manage my emotions instead. Now, both of these are perfectly acceptable ways to manage stress. Now, one thing that I will mention, though, is that if you can, changing your stressor is the more effective solution. Because if you can change your stressor, you can actually stop the stress. And sometimes what people don't realize, we often will focus on managing our emotions when we could be taking steps to actually change our stressor. So for example, if you're worried about the next exam, problem-focused coping would be looking at the study guide, emailing me if you have any questions, watching the review session, going back and looking at old lectures, making sure that what you know is ready for the test. But I also understand that sometimes that can be really scary. So sometimes people want to manage their emotions as well. If they're stressed about the test, they'll go watch Netflix for a little bit. And I think that both of those methods are perfectly fine ways to cope. The problem is when we solely rely on emotion-focused coping to help us, and we don't directly try to fix the problem ourselves if we can. So now let's finish up by talking about some of the different factors that affect how well we cope. So first of all, one factor that affects how we cope is how much control over the environment we actually think that we have. So one of the things that we find is that when we feel like we don't have a lot of control over what happens to us, when things happen to us very, very quickly and we have no control over them, we can actually develop what is called a sense of learned helplessness. This is basically nothing I do can fix it, so why bother trying? So it's basically passive resignation due to uncontrollable stress. And our understanding of learned helplessness actually comes from the work of a researcher named Martin Seligman. So I'm going to draw, and I'm just going to let you know I'm really bad at drawing on the board, so just be prepared. So Seligman's initial research was on dogs. And so I'm going to try to draw a really bad dog. Yeah, that is a terrible dog. So basically, we have this set up, and this is, you don't need to write this down. This is more for your enrichment than anything else. This is what's called the Shuttle Box Procedure. So you've got a dog in one side of a chamber, there's a fence, and then there's another part of the chamber. Now, one of the things that we'll find is that if you give an electrical shock to a dog in this portion of the chamber, they will very quickly learn to jump over the fence to avoid the shocks. But Seligman was interested in something else. So Seligman actually set up a situation where the dog could not escape and was exposed to a lot of uncontrollable shocks. Folks, we would never do this today, just to be clear. So the dog was exposed to unavoidable shocks. Now, After a while, the dog basically got down on the floor of the box and basically just whimpered. Now, after being exposed to these uncontrollable shocks, Seligman basically set it up so that the dog could move to the other side of the chamber if it wanted to. But guess what happened? After being exposed to these unavoidable shocks, the dog just stayed in the corner whimpering and wouldn't even try to get up. It thought it was helpless and that nothing it could do could prevent those shocks and that stress from happening. Learned helplessness can trigger, yes, I know. That's why we would never do that again. Learned helplessness can trigger a lot of health problems. Now, let's be very clear. In some areas of your life, you do not have a lot of control over what happens to you. I realize that, and it's scary to admit that. But do recognize that there are some things that you do have control over. And we do actually find that feeling like you have at least some sense of control over your environment helps improve your health and your outlook on life. Now, something that is kind of related to this is the concept of a locus of control. So when something happens to you, good or bad, is it because of your own efforts, or is it because of random things like luck or chance or fate? So let's be clear. I recognize that for most of us, it's probably a combination of both of those things, our own efforts and luck. But in general, most people either tend to assume that what happens to them is through their own efforts, or it's through chance or randomness. So if you believe that the things that happen to you are due to things outside of yourself, like luck, chance, fate, etc., that's what we call an external locus of control. The control is outside of you. On the other hand, if you believe that the things that happen to you are due to your own efforts, this is an internal locus of control. You control what happens to you. We also find people that have an internal locus of control, they do actually tend to manage stress a little bit better. And we also find that this is something that we can practice. Now, I believe that this idea that self-control works like a muscle, and the more that you practice it, the better it gets. This might be in doubt and may not replicate very well, but researchers have found if you want to get better at managing your self-control, that can really help with your stress as well. If you feel like you can control things and you can delay your gratification and things like that, that can also help you manage stress. And the more you practice it, the better you are at using it. Everybody good? Okay. So the other thing that we know tends to play a role is, do you tend to have an optimistic outlook? Now, I am not telling you that if you are not optimistic that you need to change that. But what we do tend to find is that people who believe that things tend to work out for the best, even if that's not necessarily always true, optimists tend to handle stress better. They do tend to be less sick and they have longer lifespans. Now, remember that that's correlational. So it's entirely possible that there's a third variable that can account for this. So folks, take it with a huge grain of salt. But one thing that I will mention, a sense of realism can also be important. While optimism can help us, it's important not to be too optimistic. Realism can be useful. It can help us prepare for the fact that sometimes things don't work out the way that we hope they would. And that sense of realism can help us prepare for challenges, and it can help us assess potential risks. Oh, it's okay. Take your time. So one of the things that I think is really important here is social support. It is vital to helping you manage your stress. Do you have at least one person that you can count on? Feeling liked and appreciated by others helps us cope, and it actually leads to better immune system functioning. And by the way, this is even true if it's a pet. People have found that even having the presence of a pet in your home is enough to lower your blood pressure. So we do find that social support has positive effects on the body and the immune system. Researchers actually did an fMRI study where people either had to hold the hands of a stranger or hold the hands of somebody that was a part of their social circle. And when you hold hands or share signs of affection with people that you care about, we do find that it basically helps your body and your brain. And part of the reason that this social support is vital is because it gives you an opportunity to self-disclose and tell people about yourself. It gives you an opportunity to have a confidant and confide in somebody, and it helps you find meaning in your life. I'm a big believer that most of the meaning that we get out of this life is the people that we make connections with. Social support can be really beneficial if that is what you believe. So I think we're going to cover almost everything here. I think there will probably be about 5 to 10 minutes that won't. So I'll make a quick recording of that after class so I have everything covered, but I think it'll only be 5 to 10 minutes. So yay! Hooray for fewer words on the slides. So let's talk about some of the different ways that you can actually manage your feelings of stress. So one of the biggest things that we find is that aerobic exercise can be really beneficial to managing stressful feelings. Now, am I telling you that if you're struggling with depression or anxiety, that all you need to do is go out for a run? No. There are, I mean, well, and I know that people say that, and so here's the thing, going for a walk, being out in nature, those can be really beneficial things, but sometimes it's not just that simple. It's not that simple, but we do actually find that aerobic exercise is a great way to manage stress. It helps increase your cardiovascular fitness as well, and researchers have actually found that there's a causal link between things like aerobic exercise and managing stress. So what you're looking at here are depression scores on your y-axis. Higher scores mean higher levels of depression. So we have two different groups. So we have three different groups here. So we have one group that is getting no treatment. We have one group that is learning to manage their feelings of depression through relaxation techniques to manage stress, which can also be helpful. And then we have another group that is basically engaging in aerobic exercise. And even though they all kind of start with pretty similar scores, after treatment, what we find is that the no treatment group hasn't changed. The relaxation group has lessened some of their stress, but the exercise group significantly reduced their stress. So exercise can really help you. Now, am I saying that you have to go and run like me? No. You can play Wii Fit. You can hula hoop, you can jump rope, you can ride on your bike, you can go for all sorts of walks. Find something that is fun for you to do. I've even seen people roller skating. Relaxation and meditation is another way that it can actually help us cope with stress. Relaxation helps us relieve a lot of health symptoms. Deep breathing can be really, really useful, especially breathing from your diaphragm. What we find is that a lot of people who are stressed tend to breathe from their chest. They take more shallow breaths and they breathe more often. You can basically hyperventilate yourself into an anxiety attack that way. So slow, deep breathing from your stomach can often help. But we also find that relaxation techniques, not only do they relieve our health symptoms, they actually reduce your heart attack risk, as you see here. So we have groups of patients that had to do lifestyle modifications, including relaxation techniques for managing stress. And then we have a control patient group who didn't change anything. And what we find is that people who modify their lifestyle and relax a little more are less likely to get recurring heart attacks. Meditation also really helps. Thoughts can influence the words that we say and how we react. If we can try to find ways to manage our thoughts through meditation, it can actually help us feel better. So one more slide and then we'll call it a day. And whatever I don't finish, I'll record, but I think I'm pretty close to being done. I think the next slide is about religion. Is this our last slide? It is our last slide. Yes, we did it. Yeah, that is our last slide. Sweet. Okay, so we're going to finish with this. We might finish a minute or two late. I hope not, but I'll do my best. So one of the things that we find for whatever reason, and I want to be clear, you can find ways to manage your stress without being religious or spiritual. If that is something you are not interested in, you have the right to do whatever you want as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else. But we do actually find for whatever reason that religious attendance is associated with less stress. So, I mean, I don't like this graph because it starts at 75 and it basically finishes at 80. I don't know how big of a difference that is, but it could be that religious attendance is associated with a healthier lifestyle. Some religions do have dietary restrictions or because of social support. But it turns out that what a lot of researchers believe is that religion, depending on your faith, encourages a sense of hopefulness or acceptance in things that you cannot change, a very stable worldview. Things aren't just happening at chance or randomness. And a lot of religion encourages meditation and prayer. Here's what I think. I think it's important for you to believe in something, even if you believe in nothing. That's still a belief. Yes.
I would just say I went to church like weekly for a while when I like didn't believe in the religion, and I still got my serotonin. So I don't even know if it's about the religion.
I think it's the music. I think it might be the music. Like music can do a lot. All right, everybody. That is pretty much all I had. If you need to finish writing this down, great. I can't believe we finished. I'm so happy. And we'll have our Zoom review session tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. I will email you the link. No, they're yours. You worked on them. You keep them. For those of you that are thinking of taking the optional final, hold on to it. Use it as a study aid. All right, everybody. I will see you on Wednesday for the test.
That one, trying to answer questions.
Wait, I got to close out first.